started. Okay, so we will get started. Hopefully everybody can access the attendance link that was put in the chat 7 times by multiple different people, but wasn't showing up for everyone. So if you're not able to see that, you can put it in the chat and we'll try to add it back in there. But welcome to the Nature of Vermont. My name is Ruben Allen. I'm the regional manager in Region 2. This session is presented by our interpretive program manager and outdoor education extraordinaire, Rebecca Roy. And there's been a lot of build up to this one with Nate and Rob mentioning how great this course is. So you certainly are in for a treat. This is always my favorite one. We are recording this for future use. Your microphones are muted, so you won't be able to unmute them. Please just put your information in the chat and we'll answer those questions as we go along. I'll try to answer them if I can. If not, then we'll hold them until a good stopping point and ask Rebecca. And at that, I think we're ready to go. So I'll hand it over to Rebecca and enjoy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ruben. And thank you everyone for being here. As Ruben said, I am your interpretive program manager, and I work with the central office team in Montpelier. So I work with Nate, Rob, Frank, Rochelle, Julie, and Kaylee in the central office. I have the good fortune of working with those folks. And I have to say, you know, I found my way into the central office, but just being part of the parks team, you're really part of a family, and the work that we do is the work that all of us do, the work that all of you do is really invaluable and really important work. And I'm just excited to be part of that and really excited to be invited to present at manager training. And I have a PowerPoint I'm going to share. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. I can't see you when you're viewing it, but I want to kick off by starting by telling you that I set up this Padlet, and I'm going to share. Actually, maybe Ruben can share a link in the chat. I realize I can't see the chat. What I'd like you to do during my presentation is go to this Padlet, and at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a pink plus sign. And if you hit that, it gives you the chance to add a sticky note to the Padlet. And what I'd like you to add is the name of your park and then one special thing about your park that really needs to be shared. And you can do that anytime during my presentation today. And at the end, I'm going to go back and look at all these special things in all of our state parks across the state. And so together, what we're going to do today is explore how Vermont is such a unique, special place and how our state parks are really a showcase for this. Anybody recognize this beautiful view? This is from one of our state parks, one of my favorite state parks. My earliest childhood memory, my most vivid early childhood memory is from this place. And those of you who are in southern Vermont might recognize it as Molly Stark State Park. Now, I'm from Maine, so it's kind of remarkable that my earliest, most vivid outdoor childhood memory is from Vermont, and it's just a coincidence that my family was traveling in Vermont when I was 4 years old. And so my very earliest memory is from Molly Stark State Park. And you know what I remember most clearly about this? Is that smell of a musty canvas wall tent. Who raise your hand if you know that smell that I'm talking about. Those vivid childhood memories that we experience, those sensory experiences are what really stick with us, and our sense of smell impacts our memory the very most. So whenever I catch that smell of a musty canvas tent, it brings me right back to that camping trip at Molly Stark, stacked up in one of those tents with my siblings. We also had a fire going, and for some reason it was cherry that we were burning. And so that kind of like acrid cherry wood smoke is another thing that really sticks with me. So I had this childhood of camping with my family in Maine and Vermont that really set the stage for this path of my career that I based on my love of camping. So tell me, what is your earliest childhood memory? What brought you here? In the chat, share your earliest outdoor memory. What was that thing that impacted you so much that set your path in life in the direction to lead you here today? Please make a comment. And if you see anything that pops up, Ruben, I would love to hear it. While you're thinking about that, because I think there's probably a lag in the chat popping up.
Yeah,
So,
there's some are coming in, Rebecca. There's camping under the stars with my telescope as a kid.
love
Uh,
it.
when we passed it in the, oh, sorry, that's wrong thing. Loons,
Mm-hmm.
walking on the trails at Indian Ladder Park in Altamont, New York,
Ooh.
Green Mountain State, Boston Harbor Islands, being knocked down by an ocean wave,
Sand in your swimsuit, yes.
hunting and fishing with my dad,
Uh,
being allowed to stay up for meteor showers with
wow.
popped popcorn and a fire.
Oh, that is awesome.
Growing up in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia,
Mhm.
hiking in the fog, deer hunting and trout fishing in the western Maine foothills. Family
Nice.
members worked for parks, visited many Region 3 parks as a child, fishing in western Maryland mountains with grandfather and dad. I remember my dad taking me to Lake Bombazine and eating fruity pebbles for breakfast, sitting on the rough picnic tables and smelling the charcoal grill. Uh,
Nice. I love it.
and there's a lot more. If you want me to, let's see, being raised in the outdoors and truck camping with my family, Mount Washington, the old man of the mountain, swimming in the
Mm.
Kaweah River Falls and Sequoia National Park, and more.
Wow. These are such great stories. Thank you, everyone who took the moment to share. It really is those vivid childhood experiences that set us on paths in life. And what we discover, Rochelle and I worked with some students at Champlain College that did some marketing research for us and did some interviews with students, is that those impactful experiences really need to happen before age 9. And so, I'm talking about Molly Stark when I was 4. Probably those examples that you brought up are also from your early childhood. And what an opportunity for all of us to provide these same kind of experiences for young people through our work. Thank you. Okay. So I think we can all agree that Vermont is very special. That's why we're all here. Maybe you're from here originally and you know the value and the beauty of Vermont, and maybe you're moving here because Vermont and the natural heritage here really speaks to you. So tell me, how did you feel when you drove into the Green Mountain State from neighboring states? Driving into Vermont, you definitely have this distinctive feel. Looking around at the landscape, it looks very different. I'm from Maine, so I approach from New Hampshire, and you cross over the Connecticut River, and it just feels like a different place. Feel free to comment about how it feels for you when you drive into Vermont from one of the neighboring states. And I'll look at that. I'll read over your comments later. But part of the distinctive feel of Vermont that makes it really different is that the topography and geology here is really different because Vermont really is on a separate continent. And I'll show you what I mean by this very fancy diagram that I found. I'm just kidding. I made this really fancy diagram. Okay, so 400 million years ago, Vermont was on the east coast of this gigantic continent. So if you can imagine Vermont with a coast, what an unbelievable place that must have been 400 million years ago. Meanwhile, there were these microcontinents floating out there, and one of them floated over and slammed into Vermont a whole bunch of times. And yes, that was New Hampshire with the rest of New England attached to it. So New Hampshire came along and bashed into Vermont over and over and over again, which the force of that folded Vermont into all the north-south mountain ridges and valleys that we have today. That's why we have all the beautiful ridge lines, and also why we pick on New Hampshire by calling it things like upside down Vermont, for example. You probably have your own nicknames for New Hampshire, but the reason why it feels so different driving into Vermont from New Hampshire is because of that big difference in our landscape and how it came to be the way it is here in Vermont. As a result of that traumatic geologic event, we have all of these beautiful mountain state parks here in the Green Mountain State. Like, for example, anyone recognize this one? This is Coolidge State Park, which has the most beautiful lean-to views in the entire system, and a whole loop, a whole campground loop that is 100% lean-tos. Beautiful, beautiful place. We also have these rich north-south river valleys because of that mountain building. We've got the mountains and then the valleys. And the Western Abenaki people have lived here in Vermont for over 10,000 years and continue to live here. This is the West River in Jamaica State Park, which is also Jamaica's the background in my photo behind me here. This river was a major travel route for Abenaki people. They traveled with canoes from Jamaica down the West River to the Connecticut River and beyond, and then upriver to Lake Champlain and beyond. And an archaeological dig we did in the Deus area of Jamaica in 2010, it revealed stones originating from northern Maine and a pottery shard with Haudenosaunee influences, which is from the Ohio River Valley. So that means those native people were traveling back and forth and also exchanging things from this wide geologic area. And so this river, the West River that you're looking at here in the picture, and all the rivers in Vermont were important travel lanes, and they still are travel lanes for people and wildlife today. For example, anywhere that you drive in Vermont, you're very likely to drive along a river. Our roads tend to follow rivers, except for those rare roads that have to drive over mountains because of our topography. The easiest travel lane is along a river or in a river, and that's true for people and for wildlife. Because these rivers are mostly mountain sourced, it's cold, fast moving water, which is perfect habitat for beautiful cold water fish like this brook trout here. And because of our topography, our lakes also tend to go north-south in shape because of the steep topography, like Echo Lake here, seen in Camp Plymouth State Park, another beautiful state park. They're all beautiful. And these lakes provide great habitat for all kinds of animals, including the American black duck, as you see here. This is the kind of animal that our visitors are most likely to see because they're just really calm. They're really populous in our beaches, and they like to eat plants, and so they're in kind of the more shallow water. They're on the edges of the water, so they tend to see them a lot. What other wildlife have you seen around Vermont, around the lakes in Vermont, besides black ducks? Go ahead and comment what you've seen.
Groundhogs,
Yeah, groundhogs.
loons,
Loons, yes.
loons, woodpeckers, eagles,
Yeah.
beavers, eagles, moose, whistle pigs, brown booby, lots of waterfowl, raccoons, really big snapping turtles at Emerald Lake.
Oh, yeah, really big snapping turtles. I love it. Thank you, everyone.
Mergansers, otters, and snakes. And the
Awesome.
whole
Otters are fun to watch. So was Vermont always this beautiful 75% forested green oasis we see today? Like in places like this is Woodford State Park, another beautiful state park in southern Vermont. Land use has changed in Vermont over time. So Vermont has not always been 75% forested. So earlier I was talking about how New Hampshire slammed into Vermont and made all of our north-south valleys and ridges. And since we're on a different continent than New Hampshire, we also have very different soils. Our bedrock is metamorphic rock, and the bedrock is the foundation for our soils. The rock gets worn down and that becomes that foundation for our soils. And as a result, we have very calcium-rich soils in Vermont, which is not the case in igneous rock, New Hampshire. So in other places that have that igneous base, they have more acidic soils and it's a lot more sandy. So in New Hampshire, for example, you see sandy soil and white pines are very common all over New Hampshire. And here in Vermont, can you guess what our most numerous tree is? We have more of this type of tree than any other type of tree. Any guesses coming in, Ruben, for that?
No, the first guess is maple.
Yeah, it's specifically sugar maple. I mean, raise your hand if you like maple syrup. Yeah, I think that's just about universal. If you don't like maple syrup and you live in Vermont, I'm not sure you can get a driver's license here. Um, just about everywhere you go in the woods, you see rich soils and all the plants that like to grow there. And so the rich soils in Vermont is what attracted European settlers into Vermont from other places. And these rich soils bring us all sorts of beautiful ephemeral wildflowers this time of year. They open on the forest floor before the tree leaves emerge, um, like this red trillium, which are likely blooming in your park right now. And the reason why these wildflowers are blooming before the leaves come out is because they have sunlight on them. So normally when you go walking in the forest in the summertime, it feels cooler. If you're walking from an open area and you walk into the forest, it feels like such a relief because you're in the shade and it cools you down. It's very shady because of all the tree leaves are out. But this time of year is not the case. You walk into the forest and the sun is still reaching you because the leaves are not out yet. Well, the sun is also reaching the forest floor. And so this is the opportunity for these wildflowers, which are ephemeral, which means temporary, to grow, blossom, pollinate, and then grow their fruits or berries to in order to propagate and spread their seeds before the leaves come out. This is all a competition for sunlight, right? Because during the summertime, they are completely in the shade. It's harder for them to be able to blossom and go to fruit like this. So that's why we call them ephemerals, because they're temporary. But if you walk around in the woods in your park, you're very likely to see these. And there's some other ones. Maybe throw in the chat some of your favorite wildflowers that you've seen. This is the Canada Mayflower here, and this one is very commonly seen carpeting the forest floor with very fresh green leaves, and they're popping up right now. So I'm showing the flower and the leaves in the picture here. When they first come out, you can see just literally a sea of those bright green leaves covering the forest floor, and then later the flowers come up. So if you're walking around looking at beautiful bright green leaves in the forest, it's most likely these Canada Mayflowers. Okay, what is your favorite wildflower? It's probably growing in your park right now. Here are some that are probably growing in your park right now. Did anybody throw anything into the chat, Ruben, about their favorite
Yeah.
wildflower?
Trout lily, trillium, Dutchman's breeches, ramps, not a flower though. And that's what the person's comment said. I'm not judging.
Yeah.
Daphnes and chicory, lupin, bloodroot,
Yes.
New England asters, columbine, waterpad lilies, stinking Benjamin.
Oh, yeah. That's another name for the trillium. That's what I used to call it when I was a kid too. That's so great. Those are all wonderful. I put some of my favorite ones on here too. Spring beauties, bloodroots, which are the very first to come out, and they're in the riparian areas. The trout lily, so called because the leaves are speckled and they look kind of like the belly of a trout, which is cool. And then columbine, which I remember when I was at Emerald Lake, they grow in the rocks along the side of the lake where the trail winds around this time of year. So beautiful. So I encourage you to go out and look for your favorites and maybe explore and find some new favorites, because you know what? You don't need to have just one favorite. You can have more than one favorite. So do you think these wildflowers grew in Vermont earlier? This is 1850 Vermont here. Because of settlement, Vermont was 80% deforested by 1850. So I talked a little bit about how European settlers were interested in Vermont because of the rich soils that we have here. So people followed slash marks on trees through the forest. Can you imagine taking everything that you own and putting it on a cart and just heading up into the forest, following slash marks until you found a place where you wanted to live in this landscape of Vermont that would have been 100% forested just about at the time? And these hardy folks built hill farms, which means they built their farms on the top of the hills here, which seems like, when I think about it, it sort of seems like a crazy plan because it's so much colder and the soils are thinner on the hills. But the reason why they did it, because the trees were easier to clear up in the elevation because of those thin soils, and the risk of flooding was less. At the time, rivers were moving a lot more because now we sort of restrict movement of our rivers, and flooding still happened. And so the rivers were moving and flooding was happening. And it just felt really risky for the European settlers at the time. So they moved up on the hillsides, up on top of the hills actually, to settle, which is why we call them hill farms, because they were farms on the top of the hill. So this is what 1850 Vermont looked like, though. Um, One of the reasons was, see that house in that picture? It doesn't really have much insulation in it. Well, it has no insulation in it, honestly. And folks were heating with wood and also cooking with wood. So how many cords of wood do you think they burned per year? And maybe you burn wood as fuel in the wintertime. Think about how many cord you burn. Throw in the chat how many cords you think people were burning in 1850 Vermont to keep those
64,
houses.
64, 5, 45, 20, 40. Those are the guesses.
Nice. We get some right. So they were burning about 40 cords. That's great. Somebody guessed it. Spot on. Nice job. 40 cords of wood. Okay, so that is an acre of trees. 40 cords is an acre. And they didn't have hydraulic splitters or chainsaws or tractors. They had horses, but and axes. So that is hand cutting, hand splitting, hand stacking, which I guess we do, but 40 cords every year. So that's one of the reasons the landscape looked like this, is because we were burning, or people who were living in Vermont at the time were burning an acre of trees every winter to try to be able to live here and survive here. Another reason was sheep farming took off exponentially. So Vermont farmers had the monopoly on merino wool because of a wool embargo and the rarity of that breed. And so merino wool is that really nice wool. If you have darn tough socks, those are merino wool, and other things that are really warm. So if you think about it, if you're burning 40 cords of wood and it's very, very cold all the time, merino wool is a lifesaver. And so it was definitely in demand. And by 1837, there were 1 million merino sheep in Vermont. 1 million merino sheep. So that's more sheep than we have people in Vermont today. 1 million sheep. Um, but what happened after 1837 is that competition opened up and people started raising these sheep in other parts of the country. And so folks started abandoning their hill farms and moving out west to the Ohio River Valley, where the soils were even richer and the topography is a lot more farm friendly. So at this time, those European settlers, those white settlers, started moving off the landscape and moving west, and then our forests started growing up again. Because if you've ever tried to maintain a field or a lawn area in Vermont, you'll know that the forest is always trying to grow back, which is a wonderful thing about our rich soils that we have here, that we've maintained the rich soils in spite of being almost all deforested by 1850. But the mark of these early white settlers were left on the landscape, and you see the evidence of them all over the woods in many state parks across the state. This photo is from Bombazine State Park, which is the remnants of West Castleton, which is a slate mining company. It's in the park. There's a beautiful history hike there where you can explore these ruins. But in addition, we have stone fences found in the woods across the state, cellar holes, historic plantings, and other remnants of the past live on. You don't have to venture out into the woods very far to see these evidence of past land use. All the things that we find in the woods tell us stories about the past. And sometimes the evidence we find is easier to delineate than others. Our state parks have such a rich history, and each one has its own unique story, like this fancy picnic shelter at DAR, which is featured in the movie What Lies Beneath, and this beautiful, peaceful Zen garden at Taconic Mountains Ramble State Park. And of course, we can't forget Vermont's very first state park, Mount Philo, which was established in 1924. And we can clearly see why it was established. Look at that view. What do you see there? So my Mainer dad always jokes with me about how we wasted all of our lakes on one big lake, which is Lake Champlain. And, my dad is right. Lake Champlain is a really, really big lake and a wonderful natural resource for plants, animals, and for our park visitors too. Lake Champlain is 107 miles long and 400 feet deep at its deepest point. What do you think lives down there? What lives down at 400 feet deep?
Champ.
Yeah, I know. People see Champ. Keep an eye out for Champ if you're in one of the Champlain Island parks this year. But one thing that has been scientifically proven to live in the bottom of the lake are sturgeon, which is a prehistoric fish. Um, just a remarkable fish. And so maybe people who see Champ see sturgeon, or maybe Champ and the sturgeon live peacefully together down at that depth. I don't know. But 400 feet deep is really deep. And there's a lot of things that we do not understand in this world. And this picture is from the Echo Center, where you can go and see sturgeon up close. I recommend that. So Lake Champlain is also known as a world-class fishery for lake trout and bass. And there's a rare turtle living in Vermont, which would not be here in Vermont if not for Lake Champlain, which is the spiny softshell turtle. And there's its adorable face. Map turtles also only live in Lake Champlain and otherwise would not be here in Vermont if not for this one big lake. And Lake Champlain is such a unique habitat. It provides space for a wide variety of plants and animals because of all the diverse ecosystems there, including gorgeous sand dunes at Alberg Dunes State Park. If you visit Alberg, which is gorgeous, I recommend it, and then you drive south on Route 2, you can visit some other really unique places. Like you can stop and go swimming at Sandbar State Park, which is one of the many state parks built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC, or the Civilian Conservation Corps, was one of the federal public work programs set up under President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. So it employed thousands of young men who lived paramilitary style in camps they built around the country. And the CCC built about 1/3 of the state parks in Vermont, which includes Elmore, shown here. It's the beach house at beautiful Elmore, and New Discovery, among many, many, many others. And state parks are not just a treasure trove of history, but they provide unique habitats for plants and animals, like this common loon, which was nesting at New Discovery. I'm going to try to play part of the song here. Okay, hopefully you could hear that. Who else loves loons? I do. I was just talking with someone last week who brings folks into state parks for programs who need assistance in exploring. And they were telling me a story about this blind piano tuner. So someone who had a great ear for tuning pianos, but was blind, who went kayaking at Silver Lake State Park for the first time and heard a loon for the very first time. So he's an adult hearing a loon for the very first time. And maybe you remember the first time you heard a loon. I don't. I grew up listening to them, and so I don't have that moment of first hearing it. But for this piano tuner person, hearing a loon for the first time, they said he was just like, what the bleep was that? This is life-changing moment of, oh my gosh, what is this? What is this thing that I'm hearing? And so, as you can imagine, what a rich and exciting and interesting experience. And the folks coming into your park, if you have loons, they may have never heard a loon before, and they may have that same reaction of, what in the world is that? Loons are just fascinating. They're water birds. They only go on land to nest and incubate eggs because their legs are placed so far back on their bodies, which makes them really excellent swimmers, but they move so awkwardly on land. And loons are like airplanes. They need a long runway to take off, 30 yards up to a quarter mile. So they are really designed for life underwater. They catch and swallow their fish underwater, and they're really great at that. It's just moving around on land, they're not that great. Um, so if you have loons in your park, you are very lucky. But there are a lot of other wildlife that lives in Vermont. Whoops, I'm still doing the loon call. There we go. Okay, here's another bird friend. Anyone recognize this one? This is our Vermont state bird, which is the hermit thrush, and it's known for its beautiful song. So thrushes are the only birds that can sing two notes simultaneously, and I'm going to try to play that for you now. I just love that so much. Um, so one way to tell the hermit thrush from the wood thrush is that the hermit thrush starts with that long note and then kind of goes into their song, where the wood thrush tends to end on a long note. So when you hear one in the woods the next time, you can really impress your friends and colleagues by identifying it. But that is our state bird, and they should be arriving back very soon. So listen to them in the woods when you're out and about in your park. Okay, let's see if I can advance past this. It really wants me to listen to, okay. I think I just went forward twice. There we go. Here's another friend that we see in the parks a lot. This is the eastern newt, and this is it in its red F terrestrial stage. So amphibians find great habitat in our state parks. This particular amphibian is interesting because it has three distinct life stages. It starts out in the water as an aquatic larvae, and then it's a terrestrial juvenile, or the eft, which is what we see here. And then it returns to the water as an aquatic adult. Um, and in the larval stage, it has smooth olive green skin, narrow tails, and feathery gills. They can only live in water during that time, but they wander around at this red F stage, and that's what children are going to spot and be excited about in the park. You'll see them crawling on the trails, and they're pretty obvious because of their color. Okay, I gave you a sneak peek at the next amphibian. These are wood frogs, and their eggs recently hatched in vernal pools in your park. They are the first ones that start laying eggs in the springtime, and so they're already probably hatched into tadpoles in pools right now. What's fascinating about wood frogs is that they freeze completely in the wintertime, which is remarkable. They just, on the forest floor, tunnel under just a little bit of leaves and freeze completely solid. I guess those early European settlers could have learned something from wood frogs about overwintering. I'm just kidding. That's a terrible naturalist joke. Um, and so as you're cleaning out your park and getting ready for your opening day, it's a busy time for all kinds of amphibians. And very soon, American toads will be laying their eggs in vernal pools in the woods. Their slimy eggs look like old-fashioned telephone cords, you know, the cords that were like a big spring. And you can actually pick them up and spring them. It's really cool. And this is what to listen for. This is what the toads sound like when they're getting ready to lay their eggs. That's so great. I still haven't really figured out how I'm advancing this. One thing that's really cool about the toads is that when you see, so the toads that are most likely wandering about in the woods, hopping along, are usually the females because they're out there and they're more adventurous and they're moving around a lot more. So if you find a toad hopping around in the campground, it's most likely an adventuring female toad. In addition to those fantastic amphibians, we also have wonderful native Vermont mammals. Moose prefer the colder climates, and you're more likely to see them in the more northern regions of the state or higher elevations. During the summertime, they tend to flock to wetlands to cool off and eat aquatic plants. They really like the water lily tubers, which are the roots of the water lilies, and so they'll get right in the water and stick their heads in there and dig those out. We sometimes see black bears, as our veterans know, and we do really well by educating our park visitors about their behavior and how we can help keep the bears from visiting our parks and cut down on those human-bear interactions. And these other native Vermont mammals, chipmunks are a campground favorite. Um, they're all over our campgrounds and they're up and about now. And you're also very lucky if you get to see this other popular native Vermont mammal, Frank Spalding. So 17 of you are lucky enough to have an interpreter in your park. We have 55 managed state parks, 17 have interpreters. I would love it if every park was able to have an interpreter, but we have such a robust educational program for our park visitors. I feel very lucky to be part of that, and it's just such a great thing for Vermont to have. Um, Most interpreters will be landing at your park after our training, which wraps up on June 9th. So we're doing 3 days of virtual training, the 6th through the 8th of June, and then June 9th, we are all descending on Camp Plymouth State Park for a day of training. And one thing that we're going to focus on is composting and messaging around composting and activity ideas around composting for your park visitors, because that's a focus this year. That and recycling, those are the two things that I'm bringing in experts to help us learn more about and come up with some good ideas for fun things to do. Um, and so if you're interested in that, please be in touch with me. But even if you do not have an interpreter, you can still share the unique beauty and special resources in your park with your visitors through all of your interactions with your visitors. So find that one thing in your park with a story to tell and share that with visitors with your conversations, and you will help them connect to your beautiful state park and take that memory home with them, which is really what our ultimate goal is. Okay, let's go to the Padlet now and see what you have commented on. I'm going to open that up. And see if I can share that. Oh no, there's nothing on the Padlet.
So I had to type the link in because I didn't have the
Oh,
link and it didn't show up as a link, but people could copy it and paste it into their search engine. Uh,
okay.
So
So maybe the Padlet didn't work. No way to post. Oh, that's so frustrating. This this goes back to my earlier comment about I can't wait till we can do these trainings in person again because technology is not my gift. Okay, so instead, let's share in the chat that one thing about your park that really is special and should be shared. And I will say that every park has at least one wonderful resource, whether it's a cultural or natural history resource that should be shared with visitors. And that's what I'm talking about, that one thing that you can share with your park visitors to connect them to the resource. Because evidence has shown that if people connect to a place, something about the place, they carry that with them and it affects their behavior. So say they're spending time at Camp Plymouth looking at the big white pine trees, swimming in the lake. They go home and they carry this experience with them and it affects what they're voting on, affects them when they're going to take their trash out, whether they recycle. It infiltrates all of their life and all of a sudden they're making better, more ecological decisions in their lives. Oh, here, they're pouring in now. Sorry about the Padlet, everyone. That was an unfair thing for me to try to get you to do and have it not work. Oh yeah, Camp Plymouth, White Pines, Grand Isle, Birchcliff Lodge, nice. Molly Stark Mount Olga, yeah, that was my opening picture. I agree with that. Lowell Lake, a loon pair. Ooh, Revolutionary War Cemetery, lots of islands to explore. Wilgus, Connecticut River access. Yeah, the Paddler's Trail, that is wonderful. Mount Escutney, observation tower on a monadnock. Yeah, Mount Escutney is such an interesting, unique landmark. Because it is igneous rock, which is very uncommon in Vermont. And it's a monadnock, which means it's a mountain all by itself. It's not part of these long ridge lines that we have. So very unique. Green River, longest undeveloped shoreline in Vermont. Yes, that's great. No better place in fall than Underhill. Yeah, that's true. Smuggler's Notch, Foggy Notch views. Yep, that's great. We have those two, Underhill and Smuggler's Notch, on either side of our largest mountain. I love it. DAR, beautiful stone pavilion. Yep. Brighton, Boreal, and Red Pine Forest. Yeah. So the Boreal Forest is, although the most common forest in the whole world, in Vermont, it's very uncommon. And so there it is at Brighton. And they also have a natural red pine stand, which is really cool. Button Bay, yeah, button formations, Girl Scout roundup history there. Listening to loons while sitting around a campfire at Waterbury Reservoir, that sounds heavenly. Site 42 at Lake St. Catherine. I need to visit that campsite. I haven't been there. Um, Kingsland Bay, Lake Champlain, black locust trees. Yeah, those locust trees are big and beautiful. Turtles, flowers. Half Moon, can't wait to see the water lilies bloom. Yes, beautiful, and they smell so nice. Alberg Dunes, Sandy Beach, yeah. Woodford, highest elevation state park campground. Yeah, that's true. Woodford is such a special place. All of these state parks are special. Townsend, CCC Camp, Owl Family, Bats, Lunamoth Sanctuary, nice. Night Point, the view from the point, absolutely. Molly's Falls Pond, couldn't figure it out. Native plants on the shore. That's great. A big planting happened there. I love it. Gifford Woods Old Growth Forest. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I know. It's such a, and nobody really knows why those Gifford wood trees were never cut. We have small pockets of old growth around the state, but not much because you saw the picture of what 1850 Vermont looks like, right? And most of them are places that people couldn't get to. So, you know, those like tiny trees that look small on top of Mansfields are actually old growth, but they've had a very challenging life growing in that kind of environment. So they're not huge. But at Gifford Woods, we have really big old trees. It's so cool. Lake Bombazine. I know. I love Lake Bombazine. I love swimming at Bombazine, Glen Lake, Slate Village, and on and on and on. I agree. Um, Garrett said, besides the incredible views, Coolidge is infested with barred owls. I love it. Infested with barred owls. What a wonderful infestation. And the Nature Center and lean-to views at Coolidge, Kilcare, lake access, panoramic view of a lake. Yeah, that view from Kilcare is unbelievable. Mount Philo, ability to see the Adirondacks. Like there's not many places in Vermont where you can stretch your eyes like that far, which is really great. Bald eagles at Niket. Love it. Burton Island, you can't drive here. The only full service island campground. Goose tours available. That's wonderful. Oh, Hamilton Falls at Jamaica. Yeah, I love it there. That's great. Boat parades at Lake St. Catherine. Oh, Kingsland Bay shared a picture. That's just gorgeous. Silver Lake, great fishing. Yeah, I also love swimming at Silver Lake. Stillwater, Loons, Old Growth Forest, Peach and Bog. Very cool. So many good ones. Owls at night at Half Moon. Another owl infestation there, maybe. Burton Island. Oh, the huge boulder at Night Point. Yes. So there are so many wonderful things. And that's why we have our state parks, is because of all these wonderful natural and cultural historical things in them. And so all of these things are super special, and it's why the state parks exist and why state parks really are a showcase for everything that is wonderful about Vermont. And every task that you perform and your staff perform protects these special places and connects people to the unique resources that spur them to act in a stewardship way in all of their aspects of their lives. So you should be proud of the difference that you are making. And thank you, everyone. I can't wait to get out and visit you in the parks this summer. And please stay in touch. And we have, I guess, 2 minutes if anybody has any brief questions. But if
There
you have
was,
wonderings that pop up in your mind, you can reach out to me at any time. I would love to hear from you.
there was one outstanding question, Rebecca.
Yeah.
So that 40 cords of wood that was burned by the early settlers, was that an actual cord or the size of a cord as determined by a Vermont State Parks camper filling up their arm loads?
Oh my word, that's a
Was
wonderful
dial.
question. That was an actual cord measurement. But yeah, that's an interesting. If it was in the state park measurement, it would probably be more like 8 cord. Oh my gosh. Thank you everyone for being here. I know how hard it is to sit through a virtual training, so thank you for giving everyone your best attention, and I look forward to seeing you out in the parks this summer.
And before everybody leaves, just remember there is one more session today at 1:30, the self-care session. So where to go. Thank you, Rebecca. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you everyone for all your good work. Goodbye.